For the past 7 years, my hedges were my pride, my therapy, and my Lagusha, perfectly trimmed row of emerald green, standing tall along the edge of my front yard like a living sculpture. Each leaf clipped to precision with care. The entire length fertilized regularly with an organic blend I created myself after months of trial and error. And every weekend without fail, I would be out there in the morning with a trimmer in hand and a coffee in the other, wearing my sun hat and earbuds as I shaped, snipped, and breathed in the scent of growth, peace, and memory. Because after my wife passed away, those hedges became more than just decoration. They were a way of holding on to something, a ritual that reminded me that life, no matter how painful, still had cycles of beauty and purpose, especially in this quiet cul-de-sac, where everything was supposed to be calm and neighborly. But everything changed the day Karen moved into the house across the street. A woman who arrived like a hurricane disguised as a butterfly, smiling sweetly but walking like a judge down a courtroom aisle, clipboard always in hand, high heels, clicking on the pavement, eyes sharp behind oversized sunglasses that somehow always found flaws in things that had previously gone unnoticed by any sane human being. And within her first month as the new resident, she didn't just attend the HOA meetings, she joined the board, volunteered for multiple subcommittees, and was soon leading the architectural review committee with the kind of zeal you usually see in cult leaders or reality TV villains. And it didn't take long before she turned her sights on my property, starting with a comment about the color of my mailbox being too matte compared to HOA standards, and then about the height of my grass not matching the community's preferred range, and then of course, the hedges, the very thing that brought me peace, became her latest crusade, as she claimed they were 2 inches too tall according to subsection 4C of the neighborhood landscaping guidelines, a rule nobody had ever enforced before, let alone cited. And even though I tried to laugh it off, thinking no one could possibly care that much about a hedge's height, she followed up her friendly warning with an official violation letter from the HOA, complete with a time-stamped photo and a deadline to trim or be fined. And I complied, albeit begrudgingly, thinking that surely this would be the end of it. But no, Karen was not a woman satisfied by mere compliance. She wanted submission, control, and validation. So even after I trimmed them, she began inspecting them weekly, walking by with a ruler like some twisted suburban botanist. And every time I saw her approaching, clipboard in hand, I felt my stomach twist with dread and frustration, until one particularly hot July afternoon, I caught her doing something that crossed a line no HOA guideline could excuse, driving her shiny white SUV partially onto the edge of my lawn, wheels brushing against the border of my hedges, and knocking over one of the younger sections I had spent months nurturing. And at first I thought it might have been an accident, until I reviewed the footage from my doorbell cam and saw that she'd done it not once, but 3 times over the past week, each time during her daily patrol route, casually turning the wheel as she cut the corner too close, and crushing the delicate roots beneath the tires. And that's when the rage started to bubble beneath the surface like lava waiting for the right moment to erupt. Because it wasn't just about the hedges anymore, it was about disrespect, about violation, about someone thinking they had the right to steamroll over something that meant the world to me just because they had a flimsy rulebook and a god complex. So I decided I wasn't going to take it anymore, and while she continued her charade of neighborly authority, sending out weekly emails about garbage bin etiquette and flower pot placement, I started researching property laws, city codes, and boundary restrictions. Because if she was going to play the rulebook game, then I'd come prepared with my own arsenal. And the more I read, the more I realized something that made me smile for the first time in weeks. I could build a fence. A real one, not a decorative picket or some flimsy little divider, but a solid, legally permitted concrete wall along the property line that would not only protect my hedges from future tire-based assaults, but also serve as a permanent barrier against HOA micromanagement. And the idea thrilled me, consumed me even. So I contacted a local contractor named Vince who specialized in residential fencing, and I explained my situation, showing him the doorbell footage, the damage, the violation notices, and without batting an eye, he said, "Let's build a fortress." And just like that, the wheels were in motion, permits were filed, concrete was ordered, rebar was delivered, and while Karen continued her rounds, oblivious to the storm that was coming, I watched with quiet satisfaction as the forms went up and the foundation was poured, each step inching me closer to a reality where I could garden in peace without worrying about SUVs or clipboards. And when the wall finally began to rise, thick gray slabs interlocked with iron supports, Karen finally noticed, her expression turning from confusion to horror to righteous indignation as she marched across the street, waving a paper in the air and demanding to speak to me, her voice high-pitched and theatrical as she shouted about unauthorized construction. But I met her at the sidewalk with a copy of the city permit and a calm smile, pointing out that everything was well within code, especially since the fence was on my property line and under the maximum height for corner lots. And she stood there speechless, lips twitching as she tried to process the fact that her favorite punching bag had not only pushed back, but done so legally, flawlessly, and unflinchingly. And from that day forward, everything changed. the wall continued upward, and so did my sense of freedom, because once it was completed, it stood nearly 7 feet tall and 3 feet thick at the base, textured on my side like brick and smoothed on her side like polished concrete, with a neat little steel gutter at the base to divert water runoff back to my yard, and I even added a line of low-maintenance evergreens on the inside for extra aesthetic and sound dampening, which turned my yard into a little haven once again. And while Karen seethed, filed complaints, and tried to rally the HOA into emergency sessions to oppose it, there was nothing they could do. The wall was legal, the permits were filed, the materials matched the architectural theme of the neighborhood, and I had even included a small decorative engraving that read "Peace Through Boundaries" in tasteful script, which made it into the local newspaper when a neighborhood blogger covered the story under the headline "Hedge Wars Go Concrete," and though Karen tried to save face by claiming it was all a misunderstanding, everyone knew what really happened, and as for me, I returned to trimming the hedges behind the wall with more peace and joy than I'd had in years, playing music as loud as I wanted, planting new sections without fear of destruction, and even inviting friends over to enjoy my newly protected garden sanctuary. And as the months passed and the seasons changed, the wall remained a monument to resistance, to standing up for yourself even when the enemy wears pastels and pretends it's all about community standards. And whenever I glanced through the gate or caught a glimpse of Karen in her driveway, staring at the barrier she couldn't tear down, I remembered that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or violent or petty, it's solid, gray, and reinforced. With rebar, the concrete wall stood as a defiant gray monument against the tyranny of suburban micromanagement, a slabbed and sealed boundary not just of property, but of sanity. A thing I never thought I'd need until Karen entered my life like a blonde storm with an HOA handbook in one hand and entitlement in the other. And though I had expected some resistance, maybe a passive-aggressive letter or a fresh citation taped to my mailbox, what came next was so absurdly theatrical, so epically over the top, that it became something of suburban legend. Because Karen didn't just try to fight back, she declared war, launching what she dubbed a neighborhood preservation campaign, complete with door-to-door visits, printed flyers with phrases like "Say no to unsightly walls," and even a makeshift petition to restore the open charm of the cul-de-sac. And while most neighbors humored her with polite nods and excuses, many of them secretly thanked me for doing what they'd only dreamed of doing for years. Because it turned out that Karen had been more than just a thorn in my side, she had been a chronic nuisance to nearly everyone on the street. From measuring lawn stripes with a tape measure to complaining about kids chalking on sidewalks. So while she paraded around in pastel outfits with stacks of paper clutched to her chest and a camera dangling from her neck, trying to stir outrage over my fortress, I sat in my backyard oasis sipping coffee, reading the newspaper, and smiling as the birds returned to perch on the newly planted evergreens that now framed the interior of the wall like a garden sanctuary. And if that wasn't enough satisfaction, the best moment came when her campaign officially backfired at the monthly HOA meeting, where she tried to propose an emergency amendment to retroactively outlaw perimeter structures exceeding 4 feet in height. But she was promptly shut down by a tired board who, after years of her complaints, saw this less as civic concern and more as personal obsession, especially after I calmly presented the city permits, soil reports, and even a professional landscaping plan.